I'm Manny Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline Lawyer, and today we're talking about professionalism. Professionalism is such a big topic that it's probably going to take us more than one video to discuss professionalism. But today I want to talk to you about some generic concepts that need to be applied in every situation where you are acting as a real estate professional. You're not just a real estate licensee. You are a real estate professional. More importantly, you're a realtor. Because of that, consumers and other brokers correctly expect professionalism from you. So what does professionalism look like in the real estate industry? Let's give a few examples. Professionalism means that when you are contacted, you respond timely and graciously. You might be contacted by a consumer, you might be contacted by another broker. But whoever is contacting you, they're contacting you because something is important to them and they need information from you. Whether it's about a transaction that's pending or because it's from a consumer who is hoping to make a transaction happen. Somebody is looking to you as a real estate professional to give them information. You need to respond to their communication timely and graciously. It's not okay to put that message aside and simply not respond. Remember that although you may have put 10 transactions together already this year, this month, or even this week, the consumer who's involved in this transaction, whether it's your client or the party on the other side of the transaction, they haven't put 10 deals together already this week, this year, or probably in a lifetime. And the events that are happening in this transaction, although they might be mundane or routine to you, they are a big deal to the consumer. And they are concerning, and they are question generating. And the consumer needs answers to those questions. And you are the real estate professional who holds the information that provides those answers. So when you decide, that message isn't important, or that question is silly, it doesn't need to be answered, there's a consumer out there who disagrees. And the reputation that you create for yourself within both the industry and to other consumers is a reputation that spreads. Because real estate is a small world, and I don't care how big your community actually is, the real estate community is a small community. You are very likely to see the broker who you're working with on a transaction today in another transaction in the future. You are even likely, if you've done a good job with consumers, to see a consumer in a transaction today and be able to service that consumer in another transaction in the future. Because real estate is a small world. And when you exercise courtesy and professionalism in your dealing with your clients, with brokers, and with the party on the other side of the transaction, you create a reputation for yourself in this community that engenders others to want to work with you, to put your clients' offers on the top of the pile when there's a whole bunch of offers that are getting accepted or that were being reviewed, to introduce property that you have listed to a buyer with a positive attitude. Listing brokers, let's talk specifically for a minute about a practice that you can bring to the industry that will do a lot to create a much more positive atmosphere in the real estate industry. Listing brokers, when your seller receives multiple offers on their property and can only accept one of those offers, that necessarily means there is going to be one or more buyers who are disappointed. And make no mistake about it, when a buyer goes to the effort to write an offer on your seller's property, that buyer is emotionally invested in becoming the buyer of that property. They don't write an offer because they're indifferent about becoming a buyer. They write an offer because they want desperately to become the buyer. And if they don't get to become the buyer, they deserve to be notified of that fact. It is not okay for listing brokers to receive multiple offers, have their seller accept one, set all the others aside, and do nothing with them. Listing brokers, if your seller rejects offers, seller needs to indicate to the buyer who made the offer that the offer was rejected. You can write rejected across the face of the offer and the seller can sign it. Will that take a few extra minutes? Yes. Will it then take a few extra minutes even beyond that for you to scan that into the computer, attach to an email, and send it to the buyer broker? Yes. But I guarantee you it will take less time to do those activities than it will to respond to a single DOL complaint filed against you because buyers and buyer brokers out there never heard back from the offer that they presented. And when your property pops up as pending or sold, they assume their offer was never presented. And if you don't give them proof that their offer was presented, then they are left to simply wonder. And too many of those buyers and buyer brokers are turning to the only option they have for forcing you or compelling you to prove that the offer was presented, and that's to file a complaint with the Department of Licensing. And we're seeing it over and over and over again. Listing brokers, avoid becoming the subject of a DOL complaint by taking the few minutes that it will require to write rejected across a rejected offer, have the seller sign it, and email it to the buyer's broker. One last thought for discussion on this video. When you have sensitive or difficult information in a transaction to communicate to the other side, or even to your own client, and you have that information in every single transaction, it's impossible to get from mutual acceptance to closing without having events arise in the transaction that create a difficult, an emotionally difficult situation for either the broker or the client in the transaction. Communicate that information, if possible, by phone. In today's world, it's so easy to pick up an electronic device and text out a message or email a message, which carries with it no emotion. It oftentimes appears very hard, very cold. There's no reason for the person receiving it to understand that there's any compassion coming from the person communicating it. It's just simply a no. But if difficult information, and think about what that information might be. It might be a buyer who's asked for repairs that they're not going to get. It might be a seller who needs to modify the closing date and it's not going to happen. Those situations that create a difficult outcome for a client arise in every transaction. If you can communicate your client's position by phone, or in a face-to-face conversation, rather than in a black and white text or email message, you go a long way to creating a more positive relationship in that transaction. I hope these tips are useful. I hope that you find a way to employ them in your practice going forward. Remember, you are a realtor. Because of that R that you proudly bear, the world expects more from you. And you should be ready to deliver.
Any questions?
If you have any questions on these professionalism practices or any other question with respect to Washington real estate law, please send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member.